Welcome to Mythic Slumber, your sanctuary for adult sleep stories. Tonight we step into a gentler version of an old myth, one not about force, but about seasons, and the quiet balance between blooming and resting. If this story helps you unwind, take a soft second to like and subscribe before you settle in. Now let your shoulders loosen, let your jaw unclench, and let the world slow down as we begin our descent. The last warmth of the day is slipping away. Not abruptly, not with any sharp edge, just gradually, as if the sunlight is folding itself into the horizon like a golden cloth being put away. In the meadow, the air has begun to cool, and the coolness feels clean. It brushes your skin lightly, like a quiet hand reminding you to breathe more slowly. A few late flowers still hold their colour, but their brightness is softer now. Greens have deepened. The sky has thinned into pale blues and gentle amber, and the shadows across the grass stretch longer, calmer, more patient. This is the season when the world starts to quiet, when birds call less often, when the wind feels steadier, less playful, when the ground, for the first time in months, seems to crave stillness. Persephone walks here with unhurried steps, her sandals pressing the grass down softly, leaving a faint path that the evening light immediately begins to erase. She moves as though she is listening for something beneath the surface, a rhythm in the soil, a slow message travelling upward from deep earth. In her hands, there is no weapon. In her face, there is no fear, only a quiet attention, the kind that comes when you sense a change coming and you do not resist it. The air around her carries the scent of late-season sweetness, dried leaves warming in the last sun, distant orchard fruit, the faint green bite of stems and crushed herbs. And beneath those smells, there is something else now, something cooler and more mineral, as if stone has started to speak through the soil. She pauses, not because she's startled, but because the meadow itself seems to pause with her. The grass stops moving for a moment. The wind holds its breath. Even the insects who have been humming quietly in the background seem to soften their sound. Under her feet the ground is solid, and yet it feels like it has depth. Not just physical depth, but a kind of hidden space, like a library beneath a house, like a quiet room beneath a busy street, like a secret kept safely in darkness. Persephone lowers her gaze. The earth is ordinary at first, dry soil between blades of grass, a small stone, a thin crack near the root of a plant. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would pull a scream from the throat. Then the crack widens, slowly, not breaking like a disaster, opening like a door. A line of darkness appears, neat and deliberate, as if someone has traced it with a careful finger. Cool air rises from it immediately, goes spilling into the evening like water poured gently from a cup. That air touches the skin and makes the body relax. It is cooler than the meadow air, cooler than the fading day, and it carries a stillness that feels surprisingly comforting. The kind of coolness that encourages you to stop moving, to slow down, to rest. Persephone inhales. The scent is different here. Stone, clean mineral dust, a faint trace of something like rain trapped in rock. And underneath it all, a softness, like heavy velvet laid across silence. The crack widens further, and beneath it a staircase appears, not carved in harsh angles, but shaped with a calm geometry, steps descending into the earth in a slow curve. The opening does not feel like a trap. It feels like an invitation to quiet, a place where the noise of the surface cannot follow, and Persephone stands at the edge and looks down. Darkness, yes, deep and layered, but also a strange glimmer. Tiny points of light embedded in the stone walls, as if the earth has its own constellation. Quiet gems catching the last stray light from above. Crystalline flecks that shimmer faintly and then settle back into stillness. The underworld, it seems, is not empty. It is simply hidden. A soft sound rises from below, wheels, not rushing, not loud. A slow, steady rolling that grows clearer as the staircase brightens in the fading sunlight. From the darkness, a carriage emerges. It is not decorated with bright banners or harsh metal. It is elegant in the way old libraries are elegant. Dark wood, smooth lines, quiet craftsmanship. Its edges catch the light and reflect it softly, like polished stone. And the horses that pull it are not wild with foam and panic. They are calm. Their hooves land with a sound that is almost muffled, as if the earth itself is absorbing every sharp impact and turning it into something gentle. Hades sits within the carriage like a figure carved from shadow and patience. Not cruel, not loud, not dramatic. He looks like quiet grandeur, someone who does not need to raise his voice because a world already listens when he speaks. His gaze rests on Persephone, steady and unreadable like a dark lake reflecting only what it chooses. For a moment nothing happens, just evening air, just soft grass, just the first cool breath of deep earth. Then Hades extends his hand. The gesture is simple, not a command, not a seizure, an offering of passage, choice. Persephone looks at his hand, then at the staircase descending into the cool, crystalline dark. The meadow behind her holds the last of the sun's warmth, the last of the surface world's motion, but the opening before her holds something else, rest, stillness, a silence that feels like a sanctuary. And she understands something without needing words. Spring and summer are movement. They are growth, bright effort, constant becoming. But even growth must pause. Even the most beautiful bloom eventually closes. The world cannot stay awake forever. So Persephone steps forward. She places her hand in Hades' hand. It is warm enough to be real, cool enough to be calm. And as she climbs into the carriage, the air around her changes. The meadow's scents fade. The cooler mineral scent grows stronger. The sound of the surface, wind, insects, distant birds, becomes softer, as if the earth is drawing a curtain over it. The carriage turns toward the staircase. The horses begin their slow descent, and now, with each step downward, the world becomes quieter. The first few steps are still touched by the last light of day. You can still see the pale gold on the stone, the faint green of grass at the edge of the opening. But the light thins quickly. It fades into a dim glow, then into torchless darkness, soft, velvety, not frightening, just deep. The air becomes cooler again, a gentle cooling that encourages the body to relax. Shoulders drop, breaths lengthen. The mind begins to lose its grip on surface worries. Along the walls, the earth's quiet gems glitter in tiny clusters, crystals embedded in stone like frozen raindrops. Veins of mineral that catch even the smallest hint of light and return it as a soft shimmer. Persephone watches them pass, and her breathing slows further, matching the steady rhythm of hooves and wheels. Down, down, down. The sound of the carriage becomes a lullaby. The wheels roll with a low, soothing murmur. Hooves land in an even pattern, steady, predictable, calming. The walls close in slightly, not claustrophobic, just protective, as if the earth is wrapping her in a thick blanket of stone. As the descent continues, the temperature drops another gentle degree, not cold enough to shock, just cool enough to signal rest. the kind of cool air that makes you want to pull a cloak around your shoulders and close your eyes. Persephone's cloak, dark and soft, settles around her like heavy velvet, and the deeper she travels, the more the surface world feels like a dream that has already begun to fade. Above, seasons still turn, leaves fall, winds change, but down here, the earth holds a different rhythm, a slower one, a rhythm of still water and quiet halls, a rhythm that does not demand anything, a rhythm that only asks you to let go. The carriage continues downward until the last hint of daylight disappears completely. And in that complete darkness, something unexpected happens. The mind stops searching for what it can see and begins to listen. The silence becomes thick, but not empty. It is filled with subtle things, the hush of stone, the faint breath of air moving through hidden passageways, the distant suggestion of water far below. Persephone sits calmly, her hands relaxed in her lap, her face serene in the dimness. She's not being taken. She is entering the other half of the cycle, entering the place where the world rests. And as the descent carries on, the carriage glides deeper into the earth, deeper into crystalline silence, deeper into velvet calm, until the underworld feels less like a realm of fear and more like a vast quiet library, waiting to welcome her into its soft, eternal hush. If you're enjoying this journey so far, take a gentle moment to like the video, then let your eyes grow heavy again and keep drifting downward with us. The descent continues, and time begins to feel different. Not because anything dramatic happens, no sudden turns, no rushing wind, no harsh edges of danger, but because the deeper you travel, the less the surface world matters. Its noises fade into nothing, its urgency dissolves, its bright, busy thoughts lose their grip. Down here, everything slows. The carriage moves with steady patience, the wheels rolling softly over stone that seems shaped by centuries of quiet. The horses do not strain. Their hooves land in a calm rhythm, measured, even almost ceremonial. One step, then another, then another. A gentle pattern that allows the mind to settle into repetition, like listening to rain against a roof. The air's cooler now. Cool in the way a shaded room is cool, or the way a clean sheet feels when you first lie down. It brushes the cheeks and forehead, soothing the skin. It slides into your lungs with ease and invites your breathing to become longer and deeper. Inhale, slow. Exhale, even slower. Persephone sits wrapped in her dark cloak, its fabric heavy and soft, like velvet meant for winter evenings. The cloak does not feel like a prison. It feels like comfort, like something designed to hold warmth close while the world around you becomes still. The walls beside the carriage are not rough. They are smooth in places, as if the earth itself has been polished by time. When the carriage passes, the gemstones set in the stone catch the faintest hint of light and return it as a gentle shimmer, a quiet sparkle, not bright like jewellery under sunlight, more like stars seen through thin cloud. Here, the earth has its own secret decoration, crystals embedded in dark rock, veins of mineral glittering faintly, tiny points of quartz and obsidian that look like quiet eyes watching without judgment. Persephone turns her head slightly, letting her gaze drift across the passing stone. It is hypnotic. The shimmer appears, then fades, appears, then fades, like the pulse of something sleeping. The path narrows for a while, and the carriage moves through a corridor where the ceiling lowers just enough to feel protective. The sound of the wheels becomes softer, the air becomes even more still, and the silence takes on a crystalline quality. Clean, clear, and calm, like cold glass. There is something soothing about it. On the surface, silence can feel uncomfortable because it leaves space for thoughts to shout. But here, this silence does not amplify the mind. It quiets it. It presses gently around the thoughts and smooths them down, the way a hand smooths wrinkles from fabric. Persephone closes her eyes for a moment and listens. The hooves, the wheels, the faint movement of air, and far away, deeper still, the soft suggestion of water. Not rushing water, slow water, the kind that moves like a memory. The carriage turns, barely, gently, and the corridor opens into a larger passage where the walls rise higher again. The stone here is darker, almost ink-coloured, and the crystals are fewer. Instead, the rock itself reflects a dim sheen like dark marble. Obsidian appears in the walls, not in sharp blades, in broad, smooth surfaces. Obsidian that looks like frozen night. Obsidian that holds faint reflections, soft shapes, torchless glimmers, the suggestion of movement. The underworld is beginning to feel less like a cave and more like a constructed realm, less natural, more intentional, as if someone long ago decided that even beneath the earth there should be corridors shaped like calm thought. The horses slow slightly, the sound of hooves changes, stone becomes more even underfoot, flatter, more refined. The velvet road. A passage so smooth it almost feels padded, as if the underworld does not want harshness to touch what enters it. Persephone opens her eyes again, and ahead in the darkness a faint silver light appears. Not sunlight, not flame. A cool, pale glow like moonlight reflected on water. It grows stronger as the carriage moves forward, and with it comes a sense of arrival. Not at a door yet, not at a grand gate, but at a threshold, a point where the descent becomes a journey across. The carriage passes beneath a stone arch. The arch is carved with gentle patterns, spirals, lines, repeating motifs that feel more like mathematics than decoration. The carving is not aggressive. It does not warn you away. It looks like a quiet script written into stone, repeating the same calm shapes again and again. And beyond the arch, the world opens. A wide underground valley stretches out, vast enough to feel like sky, but held by stone instead of air. The ceiling is high and dark, and in it small crystalline points glitter faintly, like a hidden constellation pressed into rock. The ground is smooth, almost polished in places. In others it is covered with fine pale dust that looks like ash, but feels clean and soft. A gentle breeze moves here, not cold wind. A slow undercurrent of air, like the underworld breathing. And in the distance the silver light becomes clearer. A river, not wild, not roaring. A river moving so slowly it seems almost still. Its surface reflects the dim glow like a long strip of mirrored metal. Persephone's eyes settle on it, and something in her posture relaxes further, because water in darkness is always calming. Water suggests continuity. Water suggests a path. The carriage moves along the riverbank now, following the water as if it is being guided by it. The horses' hooves make almost no sound on the smooth ground. The wheels barely whisper, and the silence is so complete that each small sound feels gentle rather than jarring. A soft clink of harness, a slow breath from a horse, the faint brush of cloak fabric as Persephone adjusts her shoulders. Everything here is designed for quiet. The carriage passes another archway, then another, each one marked with the same patient patterns, as if the underworld repeats itself on purpose, soothing the mind through familiarity. And then, slowly, the first structures appear. Columns, not thin columns, massive ones. Obsidian pillars rising from the ground like night made solid. They stand in orderly rows, and their surfaces are polished enough to catch reflections, faint, silvered shapes that move as the carriage passes. Persephone watches the pillars approach, and the underworld begins to feel like a vast, quiet library carved from stone, where every corridor promises stillness, and every surface reflects thought. The pillars do not intimidate. They impress with quiet grandeur. They are tall, steady, unhurried, but they do not need to prove anything. They simply exist. Between the pillars, the floor becomes dark marble, smooth, cold, reflective. It mirrors the carriage like a shadow beneath it, and the horse's legs look doubled in the polished surface, as if the underworld has its own gentle illusion. The carriage rolls forward. Echoes begin to appear, soft echoes, not sharp. Your mind hears the sound of wheels and returns it lightly, like a whisper repeating itself down a hallway. Persephone looks ahead and sees a palace entrance formed by shadow and symmetry, not lit by torches blazing, lit by silver light, a glow that seems to come from the stone itself, from veins of pale mineral, from quiet lamps placed far apart so the darkness can remain soothing. As they approach, Persephone notices the details, steps leading upward in a long, shallow staircase, each step wide enough to feel ceremonial, designed for slow walking, not hurried climbing. The railings are simple, carved stone that feels cool and smooth. The entrance arch is high and clean, marked with subtle patterns. No loud imagery, no roaring beasts, just quiet design. Hades waits there now, no longer in the carriage. He stands at the base of the steps with a calm posture, hands relaxed at his sides. His presence feels like the room's temperature, steady, cool, controlled. He does not rush toward her. He does not snatch her hand. He simply waits, like someone who understands that the most meaningful moment should be unhurried. The carriage stops. The horses stand still, heads lowered, as if even they recognize this is a place of rest. Persephone steps down, her cloak falling around her like soft darkness. Her sandals touch the marble floor, and the chill of it travels lightly upward, reminding her of where she is. It is not unpleasant, it is grounding. Hades offers his hand again, and Persephone takes it without hesitation. Together, they begin the slow climb up the palace steps. One step, then another. The marble is cool beneath their feet. The silver light remains calm around them. As they reach the entrance, Persephone pauses and turns her head slightly. Behind her, the path they travelled lies in quiet darkness. Crystalline walls, slow river, polished pillars. Ahead of her, the palace waits. A place of stillness and shadow. A place where time does not press forward. A place designed to let the mind stop striving. And for the first time, Persephone understands the underworld not as punishment, but as a necessary space in the cycle. A winter for the soul. A pause that makes spring possible. Inside the palace, the air is even stiller. The corridors are broad and uncluttered. The walls are dark stone, polished in places, textured in others. The ceiling arches high overhead, and the sound of footsteps becomes a gentle echo, soft repetitions that never grow loud. The architecture itself is a lullaby. Obsidian pillars appear again and again, spaced evenly, creating a steady rhythm for the eyes. Dark marble floors reflect faint light like a calm lake. Quiet alcoves hold simple objects, stone basins, shallow bowls, perhaps a single pale flower placed as if to remind the mind that beauty can exist in darkness too. Persephone walks slowly, her breathing matched to her footsteps. Inhale, step, exhale, step. The palace does not demand attention, it offers rest. And as they pass deeper into its calm corridors, you can feel the surface world becoming far away, like a dream that belongs to another season. At the end of the corridor, a doorway opens into a larger space, and Persephone sees something unexpected. Not a throne room filled with noise and servants, a quiet hall, a still hall, a hall so calm it feels like it was designed for sleeping thoughts. The silver light pulls on the floor, the pillars stand like patient guardians, and somewhere beyond the slow river continues to move, carrying the idea of forgetting, releasing, letting go. Persephone's shoulders relax further. Her hands feel warm in the cool air, and the underworld, instead of frightening her, begins to wrap around her like a soft blanket. If you're settling into this calm with us, take a gentle moment to subscribe, and then let your eyes grow heavy again, because next we'll step into the Garden of Shadows, where the asphodel meadows bloom in perfect stillness, and time itself becomes quiet enough to rest. The doorway opens without a sound, not because someone pushes it, not because hinges creak, there are no hinges here, but because the palace seems built to cooperate with stillness. It does not interrupt calm, it protects it. Persephone steps forward, and the air changes again. It becomes cooler, yes, but also smoother, like silk drawn across the skin. The underworld has layers of quiet, and this is a deeper layer, where even breathing feels gentler. The hall beyond is wide and dark, yet not empty. It is filled with structure, with symmetry, with that quiet grandeur that belongs to places designed to last longer than memory. Obsidian pillars rise in slow ranks, evenly spaced, each one polished enough to hold faint reflections. They do not shine brightly. They absorb light and return only a soft sheen, like moonlight caught in black glass. In between the pillars, the floor is dark marble, so smooth it feels almost liquid under torchless silver light. The surface reflects Persephone's steps as faint shadows, duplicating her movement in a way that makes her feel both present and dreamlike, like she is walking in two worlds at once. Her sandals make the softest sound, a tap that turns into a whisper that becomes an echo. Not a sharp echo, nothing here is sharp, more like a repeated breath drifting down a corridor. The palace is quiet, but it is not lifeless. You can sense a slow, constant order, a kind of calm that does not need to announce itself. Hades walks beside her, his steps measured, his posture relaxed. He does not rush her forward. He does not pull her. He simply matches her pace, as though he understands that arrival is not a moment. Arrival is a process. And in a place like this, the process is meant to soothe. They move beneath an archway carved with repeating patterns, lines and spirals, shapes that feel mathematical, like an old script written into stone for the sake of rhythm rather than meaning. The patterns repeat, and repetition is calming. The eyes follow it, the mind follows it. The thoughts begin to quiet simply because the environment is quietly insisting on order. A corridor stretches ahead, long, straight, uncluttered. Along the walls, shallow niches hold simple objects, a smooth stone bowl, a pale cup, a single dark vase with no flowers. Not because the palace lacks beauty, but because the beauty here is in restraint, in silence, in the spaces between things. The light inside the palace comes from nowhere obvious. It is a dim silver presence, as if the stone itself remembers moonlight. It pulls in corners, it softens edges, it glides across the floor like a thin layer of water. Persephone's cloak hangs heavy around her shoulders, and for the first time she realizes how comforting its weight is. Not burden, not armor, weight like a blanket. A reminder that she is allowed to slow down. They pass another set of pillars, then another. The pattern repeats. Pillar, shadow, pillar, shadow. The underworld seems to speak in patterns, and each pattern is a soft instruction. Settle, settle, settle. In one section of the hall, the floor changes subtly, from dark marble to an even darker stone, almost matte, absorbing reflection. Here, the echo of footsteps disappears entirely, swallowed by the surface, and the silence grows thicker. Persephone pauses for a moment, not from fear, but from curiosity. In the surface world, silence is rare. It is interrupted by birds, by wind, by voices, by the constant movement of life. Even at night, something is always rustling, calling, shifting. But here, silence is complete. A crystalline silence. A silence you can almost feel on your tongue. Clean and cool, as if you've stepped into a room made of calm. Hades turns his head slightly, as though he is listening too. For a moment they stand together, letting the stillness hold them. Then, without speaking, he guides her onward. The corridor bends slowly, not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to change the view, just enough to reveal what was hidden around the gentle curve. And there it is, the Obsidian Gate. It is not a violent gate made to keep people out. It is a ceremonial boundary, tall and deliberate, framed by two pillars that rise higher than all the others. The gate itself is dark stone, polished to a deep mirror-like surface, and in it you can see faint reflections, Persephone's silhouette, Hades' calm figure, the soft silver light behind them. On the surface of the gate, carved designs shimmer faintly, not because they are bright, but because the carving catches the light at just the right angles. A pattern of pomegranate vines. Not heavy, not obvious, just a quiet suggestion of fruit and leaf. A reminder that even in the underworld, life symbols are not forgotten. Persephone steps closer. The gate's surface is cool in the air, and she senses that beyond it lies the heart of the palace. Space is deeper, quieter, more permanent. This is the threshold where the underworld becomes fully itself. Not caves, not corridors, a realm. And at the threshold, the world seems to slow even further. Persephone's breathing becomes deeper without effort. Her shoulders lower, her hands relax inside her sleeves. The body recognizes what the mind is still learning. This place is designed for rest. Hades lifts his hand, not to push, but to touch the stone lightly. His fingertips press against the gate, and the gate responds, not opening like a door, parting like water. A seam appears, thin at first, then widening in complete silence. The obsidian surface slides away smoothly, revealing a darker space beyond. Darker, yet somehow warmer in feeling, like stepping deeper into the shelter of night. Persephone does not hesitate. She steps through, and as she does, the air changes again. Not warmer, but more enclosed, more protected. As if the palace's inner chambers are wrapped in layers of stillness the way the earth is wrapped in layers of stone. The first room beyond the gate is vast, a hall of quiet grandeur. The floor returns to polished dark marble, and the reflections return too, soft and dreamlike. Obsidian pillars stand in longer rows here, and between them are gentle pools of shadow, like pockets of night. Along the far wall, high shelves are carved into stone, empty mostly, but their presence makes the room feel like a library without books, a library of silence, a place where the architecture itself is the text. Persephone's gaze drifts upward. The ceiling arches high overhead, and tiny mineral flecks glitter there like trapped stars, not enough to shine, just enough to remind the mind of distance, of depth, of an endless sky held inside stone. The hall contains no crowd, no Russian servants, no echoing court, only space, only calm, only the sensation that time here is slower, thicker, almost honey-like, dripping instead of running. This part of the underworld feels like a grand, quiet world of stone and shadow, not meant to frighten, meant to soothe. A place where the mind can rest the way a tired student rests in a silent library late at night, surrounded by the weight of knowledge, but not demanded by it. Hades leads her along the edge of the hall, where the marble floor is bordered by a thin line of silver inlay, simple and precise. As they walk, Persephone notices the details, the way each pillar base is carved with the same repeating motif, the way each arch matches the next, the way the spacing never changes. Order, order, order. It is almost hypnotic. They pass a row of stone basins filled with calm water, so still it could be glass. The water reflects the pillars above, creating an illusion of a second palace beneath the first. Persephone's eyes drift across those reflections, and her thoughts drift with them. The body begins to feel heavier in a good way, not sluggish, settled, like a stone placed gently back onto the ground. They come to another threshold, smaller this time, more private. A curtained doorway made of heavy, dark fabric that looks like velvet. It hangs perfectly still, unmoving, as if even air avoids disturbing it. Hades pauses there. He turns slightly, and in the dim silver light, his expression remains composed, calm, almost thoughtful. He does not speak words of demand. His presence is simply an invitation to see, to understand. Persephone looks at the curtain. She can sense what lies beyond, spaces quieter still, places where the underworld's true atmosphere gathers, places not meant for spectacle, but for peace. She steps forward. Her fingers touch the velvet fabric. It is heavy, soft, cool at first, then warming slightly under her skin. She parts it gently and the fabric yields without sound. Beyond is a corridor that feels more intimate, more hushed, like the aisle of a midnight library. And as she steps into it, the palace behind her fades into softer shadow. The Obsidian gate is now far away, not gone, just distant. A boundary crossed, a descent completed, a new kind of stillness accepted. Persephone's footsteps continue, slow and steady, and her breathing matches the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, and with each step, all the underworld becomes less of a place she is entering and more of a place that is holding her. And as she continues through these quiet corridors, everything grows softer, quieter, more hushed. Somewhere beyond these halls, a garden of shadows waits. The asphodel meadows, where grey flowers bloom without urgency, rivers move as slowly as dreams, and time itself becomes quiet enough to rest. The corridor beyond the velvet curtain feels softer than stone should feel, not because the walls have changed, but because the air has changed. The silence here is gentler, thicker, as if the palace has drawn its quiet closer around you. Even your breathing seems to become more careful, as though the place is teaching your lungs to slow down. Persephone's footsteps are steady and light. Tap, Tap, tap. Each sound fades quickly into the dark, and the echo that returns is not sharp. It is a whisper of her own movement, coming back to her like reassurance. The corridor stretches on, long and simple, with obsidian pillars spaced evenly along the sides, each one a dark, patient presence. The marble floor beneath her feet reflects a faint silver glow, but the reflections are dim, like memories half remembered in the moments before sleep. Then the corridor opens, not into another hall, into something wider, into space that feels like outdoors, even though you know you're still deep beneath the earth. A cool breeze moves gently through the opening, and with it comes a scent that surprises you. Not dust, not stone. A faint, clean fragrance, soft and pale, like a field after rain, like stems crushed lightly between fingers, like petals that hold no sweetness and no bitterness, only calm. Persephone steps forward, and the underworld becomes a meadow. The asphodel meadows stretch out under a dim silver sky, a sky that is not truly sky but feels like it, high, wide, distant. Pale light seems to float rather than shine, bathing everything in a gentle grey that never turns harsh. The ground is smooth and slightly soft underfoot, covered in fine pale growth, flowers that look like small stars made of ash-coloured petals. Asphodel, grey-white blossoms, calm and endless, blooming without urgency, without striving. They do not bend dramatically in wind. They sway gently as if they are breathing. This is not a place of horror. It is a place of pause, a place where nothing demands you to be faster, louder, brighter, a place where time stops feeling like a chase. Persephone's cloak hangs heavy around her shoulders, and she finds herself loosening her hands beneath it, relaxing her fingers, letting the tension from the surface world slip away. In the distance, a river moves, so slowly it almost appears still. Its surface catches the dim light and reflects it like silver glass. The river does not roar, it does not rush, it glides, a calm ribbon through the meadow. The air here is cool but not cold. It is the kind of coolness that feels like relief, like stepping into shade after standing in the sun too long. It encourages the body to soften. Hades walks beside Persephone, his pace matched to hers. He does not lead her quickly. He allows her to look, to absorb, to understand that this realm is not a punishment, but a necessary season, a winter for the soul, a quiet place where the mind can rest without guilt. They walk together into the meadow, and the flowers brush lightly against Persephone's ankles, not grabbing, not scratching, just touching like soft fabric. With each step, the asphodel blooms do not crush harshly. They compress gently and then lift back into place, as if the meadow is resilient, patient, unbothered by movement. The meadow seems infinite, and there is something deeply calming about infinity when it's quiet. On the surface, infinity can feel overwhelming. Too many tasks, too many days, too many decisions. But here, infinity feels like freedom. No deadlines, no demands. Only the slow, steady existence of grey flowers under silver light. As they walk, Persephone notices that the meadow is not empty of life. It is simply quiet life. Here and there, small dark stones rise from the ground like gentle markers. Not gravestones with names carved harshly, but smooth, worn shapes that look like they have been polished by time. Occasionally she sees figures in the distance, not frightening figures, not wailing ghosts, just silhouettes, people moving slowly, calmly, as if they are walking through a dream they have accepted. Their faces are not clear. Their forms are softened by the dim light, and that is part of the peace here. Nothing presses itself forward. Nothing demands attention. Everything is allowed to remain in the background, like a thought slowly fading as sleep grows deeper. Persephone's eyes drift back to the river. The closer they walk, the more she can hear it. Not a loud sound, a soft, steady hush, a slow lap against the bank, a gentle movement that feels almost like a lullaby. As they reach the edge, she sees that the water is dark but reflective, holding the silver light like a mirror. This is Lethe, the river of forgetting. But forgetting here is not portrayed as loss. It is portrayed as relief, a release, the permission to put down what you have been carrying, the permission to stop replaying the day, the permission to let your mind become smooth again. Hades reaches down and touches the water lightly with his fingertips. The surface trembles once, then becomes still again. Persephone watches the tremble fade, and something in her chest loosens, because she understands the river's meaning in a very human way, not magical, practical. We all need forgetting sometimes, not forgetting who we are, but forgetting the weight of endless thinking, forgetting the sharpness of worry, forgetting the pressure to always be awake and productive. The river moves, and its movement is slow enough to teach the mind how to slow down too. They continue walking along the bank, and as they do, the architecture of the underworld begins to appear again, subtle at first, like the edge of a building seen through fog. Farther out in the meadow, obsidian pillars rise from the ground in small clusters, not arranged in rigid palace rows, but placed like monuments. They are tall and smooth, their surfaces reflecting faint silver highlights. Some stand alone, solitary and quiet. Others stand in pairs or threes, like silent companions. Persephone approaches one cluster and pauses. At the base of the pillars the ground is darker, as if shadow itself pools here. The asphodel flowers grow right up to the stone, their grey petals brushing the obsidian as though they belong together. Persephone lifts her hand and places her fingers against the pillar's surface. It is cool, very smooth. So smooth it almost feels like water turned solid. Her reflection is faint on it, ghost-like, blurred by darkness. She sees the outline of her cloak, the pale shape of her face, the calm curve of her posture. And for a moment, she understands what it means to be a bridge between worlds. On the surface she is spring and bloom. Down here she is shadow and stillness. Two versions of the same soul. Two seasons in one being. The underworld does not demand she choose. It invites her to hold both. They walk onward, deeper into the meadow. The silver light remains constant. No sudden changes, no dramatic shifts. Just a steady dim glow that feels like twilight held forever. The atmosphere becomes more hypnotic with repetition. Flower after flower, petal after petal. The same pale grey softening everything. It is like watching waves, like listening to a steady hum. The mind begins to let go of sharp thoughts simply because nothing here is sharp. In the distance, another river appears, wider, darker. This is the Styx. Its surface is calmer than legends would suggest. It does not rage, it rests. It holds deep silence on its back like a heavy cloak. Persephone does not need to cross it now. Just seeing it is enough to feel its meaning. Boundaries exist, life and death, day and night, spring and winter. But boundaries are not always enemies. Sometimes boundaries are comfort. They tell you where you can stop. They tell you that not everything is required of you at once. They tell you that rest is real and it has its own place. Persephone turns her face slightly toward the dim silver horizon, where the meadow fades into mist. She breathes in slowly. The air fills her lungs with cool calm. She breathes out slowly. The exhale feels longer than before, as if her body has remembered how to relax. And in that moment, the Asphodel Meadows become something very simple, a place where nothing has to happen, a place where you're allowed to exist without performance, a place where you can be quiet and still be safe. Hades gestures gently toward a path of darker stone leading away from the riverbank, cutting through the flowers like a calm line. Persephone follows. The path is smooth and slightly reflective, and as they walk, the obsidian pillars ahead begin to thicken again, forming a gentle boundary, like the edge of a garden within a garden, a deeper place, a quieter courtyard, a space where the underworld's hush gathers more tightly. Persephone's steps remain slow. Her breathing remains steady. The meadow behind them continues to sway softly, endless and calm, and as they reach the threshold of the next space, you can feel the underworld stillness gathering closer around you, as if everything is quietly deepening. Here, the underworld stillness draws nearer, more personal, more enclosing. Around you, stone and pillar and floor repeat in calm patterns, again and again, until the simple sameness of it all becomes a soft lullaby, and your body grows heavier, and your thoughts grow dimmer, and sleep comes closer with every breath. For now, the Asphodel Meadows hold you in their pale, eternal calm. Grey flowers, silver light, slow rivers, a quiet world where time rests, and you rest with it. The path of darker stone leads away from the Asphodel Meadows with a gentle certainty. It does not twist dramatically. It does not climb sharply. It simply guides you forward, smooth and even underfoot, as if it was designed for slow walking and slower thoughts. Persephone follows the path beside Hades, and as they move, the air becomes slightly cooler again. Cool not like winter wind, but like the calm interior of a stone building where sunlight never reaches. Ahead, the palace returns, not as a sudden wall, as a gradual presence. First, a single obsidian pillar appears in the distance, tall and narrow against the silver haze, then another, then a row, and then many rows, until the architecture begins to feel like a forest made of black glass. The pillars are evenly spaced, so evenly spaced that the eyes begin to trust the pattern. And when the eyes trust a pattern, the mind relaxes. They pass between the first two pillars. Each pillar is polished smooth, but not glossy in a bright way. The surface absorbs light and gives it back quietly. If you lean close, you can see faint reflections, soft shadows, blurred shapes, a hint of Persephone's cloak moving like dark water. The base of each pillar is wider, carved with simple, repeating grooves. 3 grooves, then a smooth band, then 3 grooves again. The carving is identical on every base, so identical that it feels like counting. Persephone's attention drifts to the repetition. 3 grooves, smooth band, 3 grooves, again, again, again. The floor beneath them is dark marble, colder than the meadow soil, smooth enough to feel like it has been polished by centuries of footsteps. It reflects the pillars faintly, as if the palace contains 2 palaces, one above, one below, separated by a thin line of silver light. Each footstep is a soft tap, 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 and the tap becomes a gentle echo that returns once, then dissolves. The echo does not bounce wildly. It behaves politely, like a whisper returning to its speaker and then choosing silence. They move deeper into the corridor, and the corridor itself becomes a kind of measured tunnel of order. Pillars, space, pillars, space. The spaces between pillars are all the same width. Persephone begins to count without trying. 1 pillar, 2, 3, 4. Each count feels slow, unhurried, soothing. Between the pillars, the walls are dark stone, almost black, but with a faint texture that catches silver light like dust in moonbeams. The stone is fitted with such precision that the seams look like thin lines drawn with ink. The ceiling arches above them, not pointed, not dramatic, but gently curved like the inside of a shell. Along the ceiling are carved bands, long strips of repeating geometric patterns, a line of small triangles, then a line of rectangles, then a line of tiny circles. The pattern repeats every few steps, and the repetition makes the space feel safe, predictable, unchanging, a perfect place to stop thinking. Persephone notices the lamps, not bright torches, small recessed bowls set into the walls far apart, each holding a pale flame that barely moves. The light from these lamps does not fight the darkness, it simply softens it, turning harsh shadows into gentle gradients. There are exactly 4 lamps along this stretch, and Persephone counts them as she passes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Between each lamp is the same distance, perhaps 20 slow steps, perhaps 30. The distance does not matter as much as the fact that it is consistent. Consistency is calming. Consistency is what tells the nervous system. Nothing will surprise you. They reach an intersection where the corridor branches. At the junction, the floor changes texture slightly. A thin strip of lighter stone, grey, almost silver, marks the crossing like a quiet underline. Persephone pauses and looks down. The strip is inlaid with a repeating motif, a simple leaf shape, then a dot, then another leaf, then another dot, leaf, dot, leaf, dot, leaf, dot. She follows the pattern with her eyes until her mind begins to drift with it. Hades turns toward the right corridor. And Persephone follows without question. This corridor is narrower, but taller, giving the strange feeling of walking through a cathedral made of shadow. The pillars here are closer together, and the echoes are softer, more muffled, as if the stone is learning to absorb sound the deeper you go. Along the right wall there are niches set at shoulder height. Each niche holds a single object, not treasures, not decorations meant to impress. Objects that feel like punctuation marks in a quiet sentence. A smooth black bowl, a small pale cup, a flat stone plate, then nothing. Then again, bowl, cup, plate, nothing. Bowl, cup, plate, nothing. The sequence repeats 4 times along the wall, and Persephone counts it in her mind like a lullaby. 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 sets. On the left wall, the same niches appear, but the objects differ slightly. A sealed jar, a folded cloth, a small stone box, then nothing. Jar, cloth, box, nothing. Jar, cloth, box, nothing. Jar, cloth, box, nothing. The symmetry is not perfect, but it is intentional. It is the kind of intentionality that makes the space feel designed by someone who understands the comfort of structure. They continue walking. The marble underfoot remains cold and smooth. It reflects Persephone's silhouette faintly, making her look like she is gliding rather than stepping. The reflections move slowly, a second shadow world keeping pace. She becomes aware of the sound of fabric, her cloak brushing lightly against itself. A soft, velvety hush. A sound that is so quiet it feels like the Underworld's version of the wind. They pass beneath another arch. Though this arch is marked with a different pattern, pomegranate vines carved shallowly into stone, looping and curling in repeating shapes. The leaves are stylized, not realistic, each leaf the same shape as the next, each fruit a small round swelling carved into the line. Persephone counts the fruits on one vine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 pomegranates carved along the arch, each one identical in size, spaced evenly, as if the stone itself is practicing patience. Beyond the arch, the corridor opens into a long gallery. This gallery feels like a hall of study, a quiet library turned into architecture. Pillars stand in 2 rows, creating a central aisle. The pillars are obsidian, but their tops are capped with dark metal bands etched with fine lines. Each band is marked with tiny vertical scratches, like tally marks. Persephone looks closely at one band as they pass. 10 scratches, then a slightly longer gap, then 10 scratches again, then another gap. It is as if someone has recorded time here in quiet increments. The central aisle stretches ahead, and the floor is so reflective that the ceiling's curved patterns appear below, creating an illusion of being surrounded by design on all sides. If you look down, you see the ceiling. If you look up, you see the ceiling again. Up and down, the same calm geometry. The mind begins to blur boundaries, and when boundaries blur gently, the body becomes heavier, sleepier, more willing to drift. Halfway down the gallery, Persephone notices the sound of water again. Not loud, not close. A distant, calm presence. A slow river somewhere behind the walls, moving like a heartbeat you can't see but can always feel. The sound is steady enough to become background music, steady enough to let thoughts dissolve. They reach the end of the gallery where a set of steps begins. Wide, shallow steps carved from the same dark stone. Persephone steps onto the first one. The step is cool, smooth, the edge slightly rounded, softened by time. She climbs slowly. 1 step, 2 steps, 3, 4, 5. There are 12 steps in total. She counts them all the way to the top. 12 steps, and then a landing. On the landing, the air feels stiller, as if the palace here is deeper in its own quiet. Ahead is another doorway. Not a swinging door, but a framed opening with a curtain of heavy dark fabric hanging perfectly straight. The fabric looks like midnight. It does not move. It waits. Persephone stands before it for a moment, and the architecture behind her feels like it has lulled her into a new kind of calm. The pillars, the marble, the lamps, the repeating patterns, the counting. All of it has smoothed her thoughts the way water smooths stones. She's no longer thinking of the surface, no longer chasing explanations. She's simply here, inside a realm where rest is built into the walls. Her fingers reach toward the fabric, and when she touches it, it feels thick and cool, like velvet stored in a quiet chest. She parts it gently. Beyond, the air carries a different scent, faintly sweet, faintly tart, not from flowers, from fruit, a promise waiting in the dark. And as she steps through, the palace behind her holds its order in silence, while the next space gathers around a single sensory anchor, something small, vivid, and unmistakable, the banquet table, and the pomegranate at its centre. Beyond the velvet curtain, the palace grows quieter in a different way. Not the wide, echoing quiet of corridors and pillars. This is an intimate quiet, a room meant for slow attention. The air feels a touch warmer here, not because heat is rising, but because fabric, wood, and softer materials hold a gentler atmosphere than stone. The silence is still deep, but it has texture now, like a blanket rather than a wall. Persephone steps into the chamber and pauses. The room is long and low lit, with silver light gathered along the edges and darkness resting calmly in the corners. There are no bright flames, no aggressive shadows. The light is arranged with care, placed to soothe rather than to display. At the centre of the room is the banquet table. It is longer than it needs to be, not for extravagance, but for symmetry. But it stretches in a straight line, perfectly aligned with the room's architecture, as if someone wanted the table to feel like a spine holding the space steady. The surface is dark wood, nearly black, polished smooth enough to hold a faint reflection. Not a mirror reflection, just a soft sheen like a calm lake seen at night. The table is set, not with chaos, with order. The first thing Persephone notices is spacing. Every object sits the same distance from the next. Every plate is placed at the same angle. Every cup is aligned so precisely it looks measured. It is the kind of careful arrangement that calms the mind before it even understands why. Along the table are plates of stone or dark ceramic, each one identical in size, each one centred on a square of folded cloth. The cloth is heavy, like linen mixed with something thicker, soft enough to feel luxurious, but weighty enough to stay perfectly still. The folds are consistent, one fold down, one fold across, edges tucked, corners sharp but gentle. Persephone's eyes drift along the line of settings and she begins to count without meaning to. 1 setting, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 places set along one side and 10 along the other, 20 settings in total, yet the room holds no crowd, no voices, no laughter. The banquet is not waiting for guests, it is waiting for a moment. Above the table, the ceiling arches in a calm curve, and along it are more repeating patterns, thin carved bands that loop and repeat, like quiet handwriting. The walls are dark stone with subtle texture. In places, the stone is polished into panels that catch the dim light and soften it. In other places, the stone is matte, absorbing shine, letting shadows remain gentle. At equal intervals along the walls are shallow niches holding small lamps. The lamps are not torches. They are bowls with pale flames, each flame no larger than a thumb. The flames do not flicker wildly. They move slowly, as if even fires learn patience here. Persephone counts the lamps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lamps in the room, placed evenly. The number feels like a quiet hint, a gentle foreshadowing. In the centre of the table sits a single object that draws the eye without demanding it. A pomegranate. It rests in a shallow, dark bowl, cradled as if it is precious. The fruit skin is deep red, almost black in the low light, yet it holds a subtle glow, like a ruby seen through shadow. Everything else on the table feels secondary to it. There are other dishes, quiet, simple plates of bread, dark olives, perhaps a small bowl of honey, a cup of water that reflects the pale flame. But the pomegranate sits like a heart at the centre, calm and heavy. Persephone approaches slowly. Her footsteps on the marble floor are muted here by a long-runner rug laid beneath the table. Dark woven fabric with a faint pattern of repeating vines, leaf, dot, leaf, dot. The same calming motif again. Her feet sink into the rug slightly and the softness makes her posture relax. A chair waits for her, not a towering throne. A simple seat with a high back carved from dark wood, its surface smooth and cool. The chair is placed at the exact centre on one side of the table, aligned perfectly with the pomegranate bowl. Opposite, another chair sits at the exact centre. Hades' chair. The symmetry is complete. Persephone lowers herself into the seat. The wood supports her without creaking. The chair feels solid, dependable, unchanging. She rests her hands on the edge of the table, and the table's surface feels cool under her fingertips, smooth, polished, almost comforting in its steadiness. Hades sits across from her. He does not speak yet. He does not fill the room with explanation. He simply sits, present, as still as the pillars in the corridor, as steady as the rivers outside. The room holds them both like a hush. Persephone looks again at the table setting in front of her. A plate, a cup, a folded cloth, a small knife with a dark handle, a shallow bowl placed slightly to the right. Everything arranged so precisely it feels like ritual rather than dinner. And perhaps it is. Perhaps this is not a meal meant to satisfy hunger. Perhaps it is a moment meant to anchor the senses, because the underworld is a place of stillness, and in stillness the senses sharpen. A small sound becomes noticeable. A small texture becomes vivid. A small taste becomes unforgettable. Persephone lifts the cup and takes a sip of water. The water is cool and clean. It slides down gently, and the coolness spreads like calm through her chest. She sets the cup down exactly where it was. The cup makes a soft sound, a small click on wood. The sound echoes faintly and then disappears. Silence returns immediately. Persephone's gaze returns to the pomegranate. It is the only truly vivid colour in the room. The only thing that looks like it came from sunlight. Yet here it is, resting in shadow, as if the underworld itself has adopted it. She leans forward slightly. The fruit's surface is textured, not smooth like an apple. It has a rougher skin, firm, slightly bumpy, with tiny imperfections. In the dim light it looks like leather dyed deep crimson, a heavy fruit. You can almost feel its weight just by looking at it. The bowl beneath it is dark stone, and the fruit sits firmly, not rolling, not shifting, stable, waiting. Hades reaches his hand toward the bowl. His fingers are calm, slow. He does not snatch. He does not hurry. He lifts the pomegranate with gentle care, and as he does, Persephone hears the smallest sound. The fruit's skin brushing against stone, a soft rasp, a quiet texture sound. He places it on the table, it directly in front of Persephone. The distance is perfect, close enough to reach, far enough to feel intentional. Persephone places her hands around it. Her fingertips feel the rough skin, firm, cool, slightly uneven. The fruit is colder than the room, as if it has been kept in deeper shadow. The coolness moves into her palms and feels strangely comforting, like holding a smooth stone taken from cold water. She turns it slowly. The crown at the top, the dried blossom end, feels sharp but not dangerous. It is stiff, like a small wooden star. Persephone runs her thumb along one ridge. The skin is thick, protective, as if the fruit was designed to keep something precious safe inside. She sets it down again and her hands rest beside it. For a moment no one moves. The palace seems to wait with them. Even the flames in the wall lamps lean gently, barely shifting. The room is so still that Persephone can hear the faintest sound beyond it, the distant hush of a river. Slow water somewhere behind stone moving in the dark like a lullaby. Hades watches her calmly. He does not force the moment. He allows the stillness to stretch. Because stillness is part of the ritual. Stillness is the space where decision becomes clear. Persephone's breathing slows. Inhale. Exhale. Her thoughts soften. The underworld does not demand she think fast. It invites her to feel, to notice, to rest in the quiet. And in this quiet, the pomegranate becomes more than fruit. It becomes an anchor, a sensory point, a small, vivid object in a world of shadow, a bridge between bright life and deep rest. Persephone's fingers reach toward the knife. The handle is smooth and cool, and the blade catches a thin line of silver light, not sharp in a threatening way, sharp in a precise way, a tool meant for careful opening. She holds it loosely, testing its weight. Then she sets it down again. Not yet. The moment is not rushed. The underworld does not rush. Instead, Persephone brings the pomegranate close again, lifting it in both hands and feeling its heaviness. This fruit has density. It feels full. It feels like it holds an entire hidden world inside. And the room seems to breathe with her as she prepares. Here, everything begins to narrow to a single sensory act. The sound of splitting the skin, the first glimpse of ruby seeds, the slow counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the taste, the sweetness and tartness bursting softly in the mouth, a vivid moment that anchors the mind, while the mind drifts even deeper into sleep. For now we remain in the stillness before taste, in the quiet hall, at the long table, with the heavy fruit waiting at the centre of everything. The room remains still for a long moment, so still that you become aware of small details you would normally miss, how the pale flames in the wall lamps lean slightly, how the air seems to settle like dust, how the dark wood of the table holds a soft sheen that changes when you breathe. Persephone sits with the pomegranate in front of her, and the fruit feels like the centre of the entire underworld, not because it is loud, because it is vivid. Everything else is shadow and silver and calm repetition, but the pomegranate holds colour like a secret. A deep crimson skin, heavy and full, resting quietly on the dark table, as if it has been placed there by time itself. Persephone places both hands around it again. Her palms feel its cool weight. Her fingers trace the rough texture of the skin, feeling tiny bumps and ridges, as if the fruit is wrapped in a protective coat. It is firm, not soft, dense, like it contains something carefully packed inside. She rotates it slowly. The crown at the top, the dried blossom, brushes her thumb. It feels stiff, sharp-edged, like dried paper. The contrast between the brittle crown and the thick, leathery skin is strangely satisfying to notice. Hades sits opposite her, his posture relaxed, his gaze steady. He does not speak. He does not hurry her. He simply holds the quiet around her, the way stone holds silence. Persephone's breathing slows to match the stillness. Inhale. Exhale. The underworld does not demand decisions shouted aloud. It invites decisions that arrive gently, like sleep arriving. Persephone reaches for the knife. The handle is cool, smooth, and heavy enough to feel real in her hand. The blade catches a thin line of silver light. Just a line, like a moonbeam pressed into metal. She does not lift it quickly. She raises it slowly, as if movement itself should remain soft. Then she sets the fruit steady with her left hand and brings the blade to the skin. The first contact makes a small sound, not a dramatic slice, a quiet scrape, a soft rasp of metal against rough fruit. Persephone presses gently. The skin gives slowly, resisting at first, then yielding with a subdued, crisp sound like breaking through a thin layer of dried leaf, a delicate crack. The sound is satisfying in a calm way, like the snap of a twig far away, softened by distance. She draws the blade in a shallow line around the fruit, not cutting deep, just marking the skin, guiding the opening. The knife makes tiny sounds as it moves. Scrape, press, scrape. Each sound is small and precise, and the underworld's silence makes those sounds feel larger, more vivid. Persephone sets the knife down. Now the fruit has a line around it, like a seam waiting to be opened. She places both thumbs into the seam and begins to pull gently. The skin resists again. The pomegranate is stubborn. It wants to keep its secret. Persephone's fingers tighten slightly, and her thumbs push inward. Then, softly, the fruit opens. Not with a loud tear, with a wet, crisp sound, a gentle kirk that is both fresh and deep, like the first crack of ice melting on a river's edge. The pomegranate splits into two halves, and the air fills instantly with a faint scent. Tart sweetness, freshness, a subtle sharpness that wakes the tongue even before tasting. Inside, the seeds appear, ruby red, glossy. These are packed tightly in pale membranes like gems arranged in careful clusters. The colour is startling against the dim silver light. It looks like sunlight trapped in jewel form. Persephone holds one half close to her face and looks at the seeds. They glisten, not aggressively, quietly, each one a small bead of translucent red, catching the pale flame light and returning it as a softened glow. She tilts the half slightly, and the seeds shift just a little, barely moving, held in place by their own density. Hades watches calmly. The room remains silent. The only sound is Persephone's slow breathing and the faint crackle of a tiny flame somewhere in a wall niche. Persephone chooses one seed. She plucks it gently between two fingers. The seed is cool and smooth, a tiny oval jewel. It feels firm but delicate, like it could burst with very little pressure. She holds it up for a moment, noticing the way the red surface reflects light, noticing the tiny variations in colour, darker near one edge, brighter near the centre. Then she places it on the plate. One. The sound of the seed on the plate is almost nothing, just a faint tap. But in this quiet, even that tap feels like a bell. Persephone plucks another seed and places it beside the first. 2, then another. 3. The counting becomes soothing. It slows the mind. It gives the brain a gentle rhythm to follow. Persephone continues, selecting seeds with care, placing them in a small line on the plate. 4, 5. The plate now holds a line of ruby beads, spaced evenly, each one shining faintly like a drop of red glass. Persephone chooses one more. She holds it between finger and thumb. The 6th seed. 6. She sets it down at the end of the row. Now there are 6 seeds on the plate, a complete number, a quiet, decisive number. The underworld seems to settle around it, as if the act of counting has clicked something into place, not with force, but with inevitability. Persephone looks down at the line of seeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The repetition of the count is hypnotic. She repeats it again in her mind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Her breathing remains slow. Inhale, exhale. She lifts the first seed, the one labelled 1 in her mind. She places it on her tongue. At first it is cool and firm. Then she bites. The seed bursts. A soft pop. A tiny explosion of juice that spreads across her tongue with a bright sweetness and a clean tart edge. Not sugary. Fresh. Vivid. The taste is sharp enough to be noticed, gentle enough to be comforting. Persephone closes her eyes for a moment as the flavour spreads. The juice is thin, not heavy, and it disappears quickly, leaving behind a faint sweetness and a lingering tang. She swallows slowly. The sensation is small, but it anchors her. It brings her attention fully into the body. Taste, touch, sound. The underworld is no longer abstract, it becomes sensory. She lifts the second seed. 2. She places it on her tongue. bite. Another soft pop, another burst of ruby juice. This one feels slightly different, perhaps a touch sweeter, perhaps a touch more tart. The small variations make the experience feel real, present, immediate. Persephone continues. 3. Pop. 4. Pop. 5. Pop. Each seed bursts with a tiny wet crispness that becomes part of the room's lullaby. A gentle ASMR rhythm. Pick, place, bite. Soft pop, swallow. The action repeats slowly enough to calm the nervous system. It is repetitive, predictable, softly satisfying. And as Persephone eats, her posture relaxes further. Her shoulders sink. Her hands become loose. Her gaze softens. The underworld seems to welcome her with this small ritual. Not a binding chain, a sensory agreement. A reminder that every season has its place. That rest is not a punishment. It is a necessary world. Persephone lifts the 6th seed. 6. She holds it for a moment longer than the others. The last one, the one that completes the cycle. She places it on her tongue. She bites. The pop is gentle. The juice spreads slowly. Sweet and tart together. A balanced flavour. And as she swallows, she feels something settle inside her. Not a fear, not a loss, but a quiet acceptance. A recognition that she can belong to both worlds, that she can bloom and rest, that she can descend without being broken. Hades' gaze remains steady, calm, almost grateful, as if he understands that the most meaningful choices are often made in small sensory moments rather than in grand declarations. Persephone looks at the open pomegranate halves. Thousands of seeds remain inside, shining quietly, but she has taken 6, only 6, and those 6 are enough to shape the rhythm of seasons, enough to tie her gently to this realm for part of the cycle. Not forever, not as a cage, as balance. Persephone sets the fruit down again and wipes her fingers on the folded cloth beside her plate. The cloth is thick and soft, absorbing a tiny trace of juice. She folds it once, then again, returning it to neatness, as if order helps the mind relax. The room returns to stillness. The lamps continue to glow faintly. The long table remains perfectly aligned. The underworld's quiet holds everything steady, and Persephone, with the taste of ruby sweetness lingering on her tongue, feels the underworld not as darkness, but as a place of calm, a place where the soul can pause, a place where sleep can feel safe. Here, the time to return begins to arrive. The ascent begins quietly inside her. The air starts to warm slowly, breath by breath. The first golden ray of sun waits beyond the silver quiet, ready to feel almost startling when it touches her. And as Persephone rises, the world above will thaw and bloom, flowers waking in her footsteps, spring returning like a long exhale. But for now, the pomegranate's taste remains, a small vivid anchor, and a ruby memory in the velvet dark. The decision does not arrive like thunder. It arrives like a soft bell heard far away, gentle, inevitable, and impossible to ignore once you notice it. In the banquet chamber, the lamps continue to glow with their pale, patient flames. The long table remains perfectly set, untouched plates aligned with quiet precision. The pomegranate halves rest in their bowl like opened secrets, ruby seeds still shining under silver light. But something in the air shifts. Not a gust, not a chill, just a subtle loosening, as if the underworld itself is making room for movement. Persephone sits very still, her hands folded loosely on the dark table, feeling the faint lingering sweetness on her tongue. The taste is small now, fading gently, but its memory remains vivid. tart and bright, like a tiny spark held inside velvet darkness. Hades watches her, high calm as ever, his presence steady, neither clinging nor pushing. He does not fill the room with speeches about fate, he simply allows the moment to breathe. And then, in the quiet, Persephone senses it, a thread pulling upward, a distant warmth, not heat, not sunlight, but the idea of warmth, an echo from the surface world where seasons turn openly. The time to return has come, not as an escape, as part of the cycle. Persephone rises slowly from her chair. The wood does not creak. The rug beneath her feet absorbs the sound of movement, keeping everything gentle. She adjusts her cloak around her shoulders, letting the heavy fabric settle again like a blanket. Hades stands too, and for a moment they simply face each other across the table, the underworld holding them both in its deep hush. Then he gestures softly toward the doorway, and Persephone follows. The velvet curtain parts without sound. They step back into the corridor, and the architecture of the palace greets them again. Obsidian pillars standing in calm rows, dark marble floors reflecting faint silver light, patterns repeating with soothing consistency. Persephone's footsteps return in quiet taps, and the corridor gives back soft echoes that feel like whispers. Tap, tap, tap. The air here is cool, but Persephone notices something new, a faint change, a subtle lift in temperature, not enough to feel warm, but enough to feel different from the deeper chambers. Like the first hint of spring before the snow melts, like the first day you step outside and notice the wind isn't as sharp. It is only a suggestion, but suggestions are powerful. They tell the body what is coming. They prepare the mind. As they walk, the silver light begins to thin, replaced by deeper shadow. Not darker in a frightening way, just dimmer, as if the palace's inner glow is falling behind them. The corridor stretches long and straight, familiar now in its repetition. Pillar, space, pillar, space. The counting rhythm returns, soothing Persephone's mind the way it soothes yours, predictable, steady, safe. She counts her steps quietly. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers drift like a lullaby. At the end of the corridor, the obsidian gate appears again, tall and mirror dark, reflecting only faint shapes in its surface. The carved pomegranate vines along its border seem quieter now, no longer foreshadowing, simply part of what has happened. Hades touches the gate lightly, and the stone parts in silence, opening a narrow seam that widens smoothly. Persephone steps through. The air beyond is cooler again, but the faint upward warmth remains. A distant thread running through the underworld like a hidden river of heat. They move out of the palace heart and back into the broader underworld passages. Here, the space feels more open, like the underground valley they travelled through earlier. The ceiling is higher. The river's soft hush returns, slow water moving somewhere nearby, steady and calm. Persephone turns her head toward the silver river. It remains the same, unhurried, reflective, patient. Lethe continues to glide, offering forgetting and relief. And yet Persephone's gaze does not linger long, because now she can sense another direction, upward. They return to the path that leads toward the caves, the velvet road that once carried them downward. The horses are waiting again, calm and still, their dark forms blending gently with the shadows. The carriage stands ready, not impatient, not dramatic, a quiet vehicle for a quiet transition. Persephone steps in, and as she settles onto the seat, the heavy cloak pools around her like dark water. Hades sits opposite her, his presence steady as stone. The carriage begins to move. At first it feels almost the same as the descent. The wheels roll softly. The hooves land in calm rhythm. The corridor walls drift by, dark stone and faint mineral glimmers. But slowly, gently, the ascent reveals itself. The air changes first. It becomes less cool, not warm, just less cold. The shift is gradual enough to be soothing, like the body warming under blankets after you've been chilly. Then the sound changes. Not louder, but different. Echoes behave differently when you move upward. The corridor seems to carry the sound of hooves farther ahead, as if the underworld is opening rather than closing. The crystals in the walls glitter more often now, catching faint hints of something brighter above. Tiny points of light, quiet gems, like the earth is reminding Persephone that it holds beauty in both directions, up and down, shadow and bloom. The carriage continues upward through the long cave road. Persephone watches the stone walls with a calm gaze, her thoughts softened by the steady rhythm of movement. The underworld has done its work. It has quieted her mind. It has settled her heart. Now it is returning her to brightness, but gently, without snapping her awake. Higher, higher. The air grows lighter. The cool mineral scent begins to blend with something else, something faintly green, almost imperceptible at first. A whisper of surface scent, a hint of soil that has been warmed by sun, a trace of leaves, a suggestion of wind. The underworld and the surface world begin to overlap in the air itself, like two seasons touching at the edge of a calendar. Persephone's breathing deepens. Inhale, exhale. She feels the faint warmth more clearly now, and with it comes a subtle comfort. Not excitement, comfort. The body recognizes warmth as safety. The mind recognizes light as possibility. The ascent continues. The corridor widens, then narrows, then widens again, each shift gentle, like the underworld is shaping the return in slow steps. Persephone notices the sound of water fading behind them. The river's hush becomes distant, then quieter, then only a memory. In its place, the faint sound of air moving becomes more present. Wind, not strong, but real. Wind that belongs to open space. Wind that belongs to the living world. And then, ahead, a new light appears. Not silver, gold. At first, it is only a thin line, like a blade of sunlight slipped through a crack. Then it grows wider. The gold is soft at first, almost pale like dawn. But the closer the carriage moves, the brighter it becomes, until Persephone has to narrow her eyes slightly. The warmth of it reaches her skin. Not hot, warm, like a hand placed gently on the forehead. The horses slow as they approach the opening. The carriage wheels roll quietly over the last stretch of stone. And then Persephone feels it. The threshold, the boundary between worlds. Behind her, the underworld's velvet calm. Ahead, the surface is waking light. The carriage stops. Persephone steps down. Her sandals touch stone that has been warmed by sun, and the difference is immediate. A soft heat travelling upward into her feet, into her legs, into her body. She inhales, and the air is different. It holds the scent of life, soil, leaves, distant flowers, the clean openness of wind. The sun's ray touches her face, and the warmth is almost blinding after so much silver darkness. But it is not harsh. It is comforting. A reminder. A return. Persephone lifts her hand to shield her eyes, and as she looks outward, she sees the world above beginning to thaw. Not fully spring yet, but the first signs, the first release. A thin layer of frost melting away from the edges of stone. A patch of ground darkening as ice loosens its hold. a small bud on a branch swelling slightly as if it's been waiting for her. Persephone steps forward, and where her foot touches the soil, something happens. Not instantly in a flashy burst, gently. The earth softens, the cold retreats, a faint green pushes upward like a quiet promise. A small flower unfolds with careful patience, not a sudden explosion of colour, just a bloom opening the way a sleepy eye opens, slowly, calmly, naturally. The world recognises her, the world responds, and as Persephone begins to walk into the light, the underworld behind her remains calm, not angry, not empty, simply resting, waiting for the next turn of the cycle. As she walks, each step lets the thaw spread. Golden sun reaching farther, a warming breeze moving softly through branches, bird song slowly returning at the edges of hearing, until spring rises fully, not as frantic energy, but as a gentle awakening, a world blooming again, because rest has done its quiet work. The first sunlight feels like a warm hand on the face, not pushing, not forcing you awake, just resting there, gentle and steady, reminding your body that warmth exists, that light returns, that the world can soften again. Persephone stands at the threshold between worlds, her cloak still heavy with underworld coolness, her skin still carrying the memory of silver shadows. Behind her, the cave mouth is dark and quiet, an opening that leads down into velvet stillness. Ahead of her, the surface stretches wide and pale, waking slowly from winter. The air here tastes different. It is not mineral and enclosed. It is open. It holds faint scents of damp soil and thawing earth, the subtle sweetness of sap rising in trees, the clean sharpness of cold air that has begun to loosen its grip. Persephone inhales, and the breath she takes feels like it reaches deeper than her lungs, as if her whole body is drinking the season. She exhales slowly, and the exhale looks almost visible in the cool air, a soft cloud that dissolves quickly. The world is quiet, not the crystalline silence of the underworld, a living quiet, a quiet where you can hear small things, a drip of melting ice, a distant rustle in dry grass, the faint movement of wind through bare branches. Persephone takes one slow step forward. Her sandal presses into soil that is still firm in places but beginning to soften. The ground feels cold beneath the thin layer of warmth, like a sleeping animal just starting to stir. And where her foot touches, the frost loosens, not dramatically, gently. A thin white edge of ice pulls back like fabric sliding away from skin. Darker soil appears beneath, cut as damp and rich, smelling faintly of minerals and life. Persephone takes another step. Again, the thaw follows. A small circle of softened ground, a slight release, a quiet permission given to the earth. You may wake. She walks slowly, not rushing the world. Because spring is not meant to arrive like a shout. Spring is meant to arrive like a breath. One step, then another, and with each step the landscape responds. A bud on a low branch swells slightly, as if it has been listening. A thin green blade pushes upward through damp soil. A small flower opens its petals, not in a sudden bloom, but in a gradual unfolding, petal by petal like a slow yawn. The sun above is steady now, warmer than before, and its warmth feels comforting rather than intense. It spreads across Persephone's face, her hands, the top of her cloak, turning the dark fabric into a soft contrast against the pale winter landscape. She begins to loosen the cloak, not removing it entirely, just easing it from her shoulders, letting the warmth touch more of her skin. The underworld's coolness still clings to her, and that coolness feels like a memory of rest. something she carries with her, even in the light, because that is the balance. Rest does not vanish when you wake. Rest becomes the foundation beneath waking life. Persephone continues walking, and the thaw spreads in a gentle trail behind her. The ground darkens, the air feels slightly softer, the wind becomes less sharp. Somewhere nearby, water begins to move, not the slow silver river of the underworld, but surface water freed from ice. A small stream starts to whisper again, the sound thin at first, then steadier as the melt increases. The sound of it is calming, a soft, steady flow, a reminder that time moves forward, but it does not have to rush. Persephone pauses beside the stream. She kneels and places her fingertips into the water. It is cold, clean, alive. The cold is not unpleasant. It is bracing in a gentle way, like cool water on wrists after a warm day. She lifts her hand, watching drops fall back into the stream. One drop, then another. The droplets make tiny sounds, barely audible. Plip, plip. The smallest percussion in the world's waking song. Persephone stands again, and as she does, she hears it. A sound above, not loud. A single bird call, short and clear. Then silence. Then, a moment later, another bird answers. Faint, distant. Birdsong returning. Not as a chorus yet, as a beginning. Persephone smiles softly, not wide, and not dramatic. Just the smallest upward curve, as if the world has offered her a quiet greeting. She walks again. Her steps remain slow, unhurried, and the landscape becomes greener in response. Not suddenly lush, gradually, like ink spreading through paper. A thin wash of green appears on low hills. Moss brightens on stones. Small shoots emerge near roots. As she passes a tree, the branches that were bare begin to show tiny points of colour, buds swelling, ready to open. Persephone lifts a hand and touches one bud gently. It feels firm and closed, but it holds promise. It holds the memory of sunlight inside it, and as her fingertip rests there, the bud relaxes. The outer casing loosens. A faint green unfurls. It is a subtle motion, almost too slow to notice, but Persephone notices, because she is not rushing, and because she understands. Awakening is made of small changes, not big announcements. She continues through the meadow, which now looks different from the one she left above the underworld's entrance. This meadow is not the late autumn field of fading warmth. It is the same land, but transformed. The light is brighter now, the air is gentler, the ground is opening. A few flowers appear along the path, soft colours, pale petals, not shouting for attention. They bloom like quiet thoughts, drifting into awareness without force. Persephone's presence becomes like sunlight in motion. She's not only a person walking, she is a season walking, and yet she remains calm. Because this spring is not frantic energy. It is spring after rest. Spring grounded in winter's stillness. As she goes, the world around her feels warmer. But the warming is gradual, comfort rather than heat. A warm breeze begins to move through the grass, and the breeze carries scent. Damp earth, fresh stems, the faint sweetness of early blossoms. Persephone closes her eyes for a moment and simply stands in it, breathing, letting the breeze pass through her hair, letting the warmth touch her cheeks. It feels like waking slowly on a morning when you have nothing urgent to do, a morning where you can stay in bed a little longer, a morning where the world waits for you patiently. When Persephone opens her eyes again, she sees people in the distance, not a crowd. A few figures working slowly in fields, bending to check soil, moving with the careful pace of those who are used to seasons. They pause, sensing change, noticing warmth, noticing new life. They look up, then, and though they may not fully understand why spring is arriving so gently, they feel it. They straighten slightly, shoulders loosening. Their movements become lighter. Because spring doesn't only change land, it changes mood. It changes the human body, making it feel less burdened, less heavy, more willing to hope. Persephone continues walking, and the Thaw expands beyond her immediate steps. It spreads outward like a soft wave. The hillside releases more green. A patch of flowers blooms together, not as a burst, but as a quiet gathering. One opening, then another, until the colour becomes a calm presence. Birdsong grows more frequent, not loud, but consistent now. A few calls here, a few there. A woven pattern of sound that feels gentle against the sky, and the sun climbs a little higher. Its warmth becomes more comfortable, the kind that makes you want to sit in it and let your thoughts drift. Persephone reaches a place where the meadow opens wide and she stops. She turns back just once toward the direction of the cave. It is far now, only a dark dot in the landscape, barely noticeable. And yet, she feels it. The underworld still exists beneath everything, resting quietly under the living world like a deep foundation. She does not fear it. She respects it. Because she understands that without winter, spring would not feel so gentle. Without darkness, light would not feel so warm. Without rest, waking would feel like exhaustion. Persephone turns forward again, facing the brightening land. She lets the cloak slip a bit more from her shoulders, letting sunlight warm her arms. Her skin feels alive. Her breathing feels open. The world feels ready. And as she begins to walk again, spring follows her, not as a frantic rush of life, but as a calm awakening, a slow unfolding, a warm invitation. The cycle settles into wholeness. The deeper truth beneath this myth rests quietly beneath everything, that both worlds are necessary, that the underworld is not only death, it is rest. That spring is not only activity, it is renewal built on silence. As you drift closer to sleep, you are gently invited to embrace your own quiet winter for the night, safely, willingly, in the soft shadows that help the soul recover. Spring does not erase winter, it simply rests on top of it. Beneath every green blade, beneath every warming breeze, beneath every brightening sky, the earth still holds its darker layers. Cool soil, quiet stone, deep roots curled in silence. And that is the secret Persephone carries, not as a tragedy, as a truth. She walks through the waking world while the sun spreads warmth across her shoulders, and she feels the gentle pull of two realms inside her, light and shadow, motion and stillness, blooming and resting. There is no war between them, only balance, only rhythm, only the turning of seasons like pages in a slow, patient book. Persephone pauses beneath a tree whose buds have begun to open. The branches sway softly above her, and the air smells of sap and damp earth. A few petals drift down, pale and weightless, landing on the grass as if they have been placed there. She watches the petals for a moment, how they fall without resistance, how they land without sound, how they simply become part of the ground, part of the cycle. And she understands in a way that feels calm and complete that the underworld is not a place that steals spring, it is a place that makes spring possible. Because no one can bloom forever. No one can stay bright, awake, active, reaching, growing, without eventually becoming hollow. Even sunlight needs night. Even fields need fallow seasons. Even the heart needs pauses where nothing is demanded, where nothing is expected, where the only requirement is to exist quietly, Persephone turns her face toward the sun and lets her eyelids soften. The light behind her lids becomes warm red, like a gentle glow. She breathes in. Inhale. Slow. She breathes out. Exhale. Slower. And in her breath is the entire myth, reframed not as capture but as a promise. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to descend. You are allowed to have a season that looks like doing nothing, a season that looks like stillness, a season that looks like silence. Because that season is not emptiness, it is restoration. Somewhere far behind her, the cave mouth remains, hidden now among hills and rocks and shadowed trees. It does not call out, it does not threaten, it simply exists, quietly, faithfully, like sleep waiting for you every night. Sleep does not chase you, it waits, and when you finally turn toward it, it holds you. Persephone resumes walking, but her steps are slower now, softer, as if she's walking through both worlds at once. The grass brushes her ankles. The air warms her cheeks. Birdsong rises in gentle bursts, then fades again. She passes a small stream, the water moving steadily, and she listens for a moment. The stream does not hurry. It does not worry about arriving. It simply moves because it moves. That is how the cycle works. Not forced, not frantic, just steady. Persephone kneels again and dips her fingertips into the water, letting the cold touch her skin. Cold and warm together. Underworld and spring together. She lifts her hand, watching the droplets fall. 1, 2, 3. The tiny sounds are soft, almost imagined. Plip, plip, plip. And as the droplets return to the stream, Persephone feels something settle deeper inside her. A quiet acceptance that life is not meant to be a constant climb. It is meant to be a spiral, downward into rest, upward into renewal, downward into quiet, upward into warmth, again and again, cycle after cycle, season after season, breath after breath. She stands and continues across the meadow, and the world around her becomes more fully alive. Leaves unfurl, flowers open, the light grows brighter. But even as spring blossoms, Persephone carries winter inside her, like a calm pocket of shade. Not sadness, not dread. A sanctuary, a private room of stillness within the mind, a place she can return to without fear. And now, as you listen, that is what this story is offering you too. Not a myth to analyze, a rhythm to feel, because your day has its own seasons. Your thoughts have their own seasons. Some days are spring, busy, bright, full of motion. Some days are summer, hot, intense, demanding. Some days are autumn, slowing, releasing, letting go. And some nights are winter, and nights meant for descent, nights meant for stillness, nights meant for forgetting the edges of worry. Tonight can be your winter, not a winter of loneliness, a winter of safety, a winter of deep restoration, a winter where you do not need to perform, where you do not need to solve, where you do not need to hold yourself upright any longer. Persephone walks toward a small rise in the meadow and stops at the top, looking out over the landscape. The fields are waking, the trees are breathing, the light is steady. And in the far distance the horizon looks soft, blurred by warmth. She stands there for a long time, quiet as a statue, and lets her mind become as still as the underworld. If you imagine her now, you can imagine how she feels in her body. The warmth of sunlight on her skin, the cool memory of obsidian corridors in her bones, the tart sweetness of pomegranate seeds lingering faintly in her mouth, the weight of her cloak, the softness of grass, the steady rhythm of breathing. She's the queen of shadows and spring, not because she is trapped, but because she understands the necessity of both. And with that understanding comes peace, not the peace of getting everything you want, the peace of accepting what you need. Persephone closes her eyes again and lets the sun warm her eyelids. She inhales. Inhale. Slow. She exhales. Exhale. Slower. The wind moves gently through the grass and the sound is like a hush, like a long soothing shh. The birdsong grows quieter. The stream continues. The world, even as it blooms, does not shout. It hums. It breathes. It invites. And as Persephone stands in that humming world, she turns inward and toward the underworld within her, the place of rest, the place of shadow, the place where nothing demands anything. That inner underworld is the same place you can go tonight. A quiet room behind your thoughts, a calm corridor behind your worries, a garden of shadows where time pauses, a palace of soft repetition where the mind can stop running, a river of forgetting that does not steal you, only releases you. You do not have to fear that descent, because you descend every night. You return to it naturally. You are meant to. The day is not proof of strength. The day is just one half of the cycle. Sleep is the other half, necessary, sacred, restorative, complete. So tonight, let yourself step into your own underworld gently. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands become warm and heavy. Let your thoughts become less sharp, less urgent, less important. You can imagine the velvet curtain closing behind you. You can imagine the obsidian pillars standing calmly at your sides. You can imagine the floor reflecting faint silver light like a quiet lake. You can imagine the taste of ruby sweetness fading into softness. You can imagine the slow, steady rhythm of wheels and hooves becoming the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Slow, steady, safe. And in this imagined descent you will not be taken. You will be held. Held by darkness that is not frightening, only protective. Held by stillness that is not empty, only restful. Held by a cycle that does not punish you for needing rest. Because needing rest is part of being alive. Persephone opens her eyes once more and the spring world remains. It will continue. It will bloom. It will move forward. But she does not cling to it. She knows she will return to shadow again when the cycle turns, and that knowledge does not make her sad. It makes her calm, because it means she never has to force herself to be bright forever. She can rest. She can return. She can bloom again. So can you. If this story brought you comfort, you can quietly support more moments like this with a gentle like and subscribe. And then let yourself drift fully into sleep, knowing you are safe, knowing rest is necessary, knowing the cycle is complete. Good night.